Picture this for a moment. A group of everyday Windows users wake up on Monday morning, sit down at their desks with a cup of coffee, power on their laptops, and instead of the familiar Windows logo, they're greeted by something completely different. A sleek boot screen, a new desktop, a new logo, and a quiet little word in the corner they've either ignored for years or never taken seriously at all. Linux. No start menu they recognize, no forced updates popping up, no antivirus screaming in the background, just a clean, calm interface waiting for them. For the next 7 days, they agree to use nothing but Linux for everything they normally do. Work, gaming, browsing, editing, streaming, even printing documents. No switching back, no safety net. And what happened by the end of that week honestly surprised almost everyone involved. At first, there's hesitation. Most Windows users have heard the same myths for years. Linux is only for hackers. Linux is complicated. Linux needs coding. Nothing works. You can't play games. You can't install apps. It looks ugly. It's only for servers. These ideas have been repeated so often that they feel like facts. So when these users first log in, they're expecting pain. They're expecting confusion. They're expecting to give up by lunchtime. But instead, the very first surprise hits them within minutes. It looks normal. In fact, depending on the distro they picked, it looks strangely familiar. Some chose Linux Mint with its Windows-like layout. Others tried Zorin OS or KDE Plasma. One even went with Ubuntu, and almost all of them said the same thing. This isn't scary at all. The desktop has a taskbar. There's an application menu. There are system icons, Wi-Fi controls, sound sliders, and a file manager. You double-click things and they open. You right-click and get options. It doesn't feel alien. It just feels like a different flavor of something they already know. Within the first hour, most of them stopped thinking about the operating system entirely and started just using the computer, which is exactly what an operating system is supposed to let you do. Then came the second shock: speed. Almost everyone noticed it. Older laptops that used to crawl under Windows suddenly felt alive. Boot times dropped dramatically. One participant had a 5-year-old laptop that normally took almost 2 minutes to become usable on Windows. On Linux, it booted in under 20 seconds. Applications opened instantly. No spinning circles. No mysterious background processes eating resources. The system just responded. Click something, it opens. Type something, it appears immediately. That kind of responsiveness is something many people didn't even realize they'd been missing. By day 1 afternoon, they started installing their favorite apps. This is where many expected disaster. On Windows, installing software often means hunting for websites, dodging fake download buttons, running installers, clicking next, and hoping nothing sneaks in. On Linux, they opened something called a software store, a clean catalog, categories, reviews, screenshots. One click and the app just installs. No browser needed. No shady pop-ups for most of them. It felt more like installing apps on a phone than a traditional PC. And the realization hit hard. This is actually easier. Browsers were simple. Chrome, Firefox, Edge, all available. Logging into their accounts synced everything instantly. Bookmarks, passwords, extensions. Within minutes, their browsing environment looked exactly like it did before. Office work came next. Some used LibreOffice, others installed only Office, and a few even ran Microsoft Office through the web. Documents opened fine, spreadsheets worked, presentations rendered correctly. For typical everyday work, nothing broke. One participant even said, "If you didn't tell me this wasn't Windows, I wouldn't notice." But of course, the real test wasn't just basic tasks. It was all the little everyday things that normally cause headaches. Printers, Wi-Fi adapters, Bluetooth, headphones, external drives. Under Windows, drivers can be a nightmare. Searching for the right version, rebooting repeatedly, dealing with outdated manufacturer software. On Linux, most devices just worked. Plug it in, it shows up. Connect to Wi-Fi, done. Pair headphones, done. One person actually laughed because their old printer that constantly failed on Windows was instantly detected and working on Linux with zero effort. That moment alone changed their perception completely. By day 2, people started noticing something else. Silence. Not literal silence, but system silence. No random update notifications interrupting their work. No forced restarts. No sudden working on updates. Don't turn off your computer screens. They were in control. Updates were available when they wanted them. not when the system demanded them. That sense of control felt strangely empowering. For years they'd accepted the idea that their computer decides when it updates. Now they realized it doesn't have to be that way. Then came customization. This is where Linux really started to blow their minds. On Windows, you can change the wallpaper, maybe tweak colors, and that's about it. On Linux, they discovered themes, icon packs, widgets, extensions, desktop effects. Entire layouts could be changed in minutes. One participant turned their desktop into something that looked exactly like Windows 11. Another made theirs look like macOS. Someone else went full cyberpunk with neon icons and transparent panels. The system wasn't forcing a design on them. It was letting them build their own. For many, this was the first time they felt like the computer truly belonged to them. Gaming was the big question mark. Almost everyone assumed this would be where Linux failed. Historically, that was true. But this week wasn't happening in 2008, it's happening now. Steam installed easily. Proton was enabled. They logged in and saw most of their libraries marked playable. They clicked install, waited, and then, games launched. Big titles, indie titles, even some online multiplayer games. Frame rates were often equal to Windows, sometimes even better. One gamer said they expected nothing to work, and instead spent the entire evening playing without issues. That moment shattered one of the oldest myths about Linux. Of course, it wasn't perfect. There were hiccups. A couple of apps they relied on didn't have native Linux versions. One person struggled briefly with a specific proprietary program. Another had to learn an alternative to Photoshop, like GIMP or Krita. There were moments of Googling solutions. But here's the interesting part. They realized they already Google things on Windows too. The difference was smaller than they expected. And the Linux community forums often provided clearer answers than official support pages. By midweek, something unexpected happened. They stopped thinking about the experiment. Linux wasn't the test OS anymore. It was just their computer. They opened it, worked, watched videos, chatted with friends, played games, shut it down. Normal life. The operating system faded into the background, which is the ultimate sign of success. No frustration. No constant troubleshooting. Just usage. Security also became a talking point. They noticed they didn't install any antivirus, no third-party security suites, no pop-ups about subscriptions. Linux simply didn't feel risky in the same way. The permission system made sense. Software mostly came from trusted repositories. It felt cleaner and safer by design. One participant said it was the first time they weren't constantly worried about malware. Performance stayed consistent too. On Windows, systems often slow down over time. After months, things feel heavier. After years, they feel ancient. During this week, Linux stayed snappy. Day 1 felt like day 7. That consistency built trust. They weren't bracing for gradual decay. By day 5, the conversation shifted from "Can Linux replace Windows?" to "Why didn't we try this sooner?" That's a massive psychological change. Instead of defending Windows out of habit, they started questioning it. Why are updates forced? Why is the system so heavy? Why so much background telemetry? Why so many ads creeping into the interface? Using Linux highlighted things they used to tolerate without thinking. And then the final day arrived. Sunday night, the experiment technically ended. They were allowed to switch back. The rule was simple: boot into Windows again and see how it feels. Almost everyone did, and that's when the biggest shock happened. Windows suddenly felt bloated, slower, noisier, full of distractions. Startup took longer. Apps opened slower. Notifications popped up immediately. One person described it perfectly. "It feels like I went from a quiet electric car back to a loud old engine." Several of them didn't even last an hour before rebooting back into Linux. Not because Windows was unusable, but because Linux had simply felt better, cleaner, lighter, more respectful. It wasn't about ideology. It wasn't about being a tech expert. It was just comfort. In the end, out of all the participants, most decided to keep Linux as their main system. A couple chose dual boot. Only one fully returned to Windows, mostly due to one very specific professional tool requirement. But even that person admitted they'd consider Linux again in the future. So what shocked everyone wasn't that Linux worked. It was how normal it felt, how easy it was, how quickly they adapted. They expected struggle and found simplicity. They expected limitations and found freedom. They expected to miss Windows and instead found themselves wondering why they ever thought they couldn't leave. The biggest takeaway wasn't that Linux is perfect. It's not. No operating system is. The surprise was that the gap between Linux and Windows for everyday users has basically disappeared. For browsing, work, gaming, media, and general use, Linux isn't some nerdy alternative anymore. It's just another choice. And for many people, it's actually the better one. So if you're a Windows user watching this and thinking Linux sounds intimidating, maybe the real question isn't whether you can handle Linux. Maybe it's whether you're underestimating how far it's come. Because if a group of regular, non-technical users can switch for a week and end up not wanting to go back, that says something powerful. Sometimes the biggest surprises aren't about learning something new. They're about realizing the thing you feared was never that scary to begin with.